Namaskar. I'm Dr. Ritu Sood, Dean School of Media, Film and Entertainment at Sharda University. I'm very grateful to be given this opportunity to discuss development journalism, prospects, and challenges. I would like to congratulate Teaching Learning Center of Ramanujan College, Delhi University, and Xavier's College, Ranchi for organizing this FDP. I would like to convey my regards to each and every participant. Before we start the session, I must tell you that this topic, development journalism, prospects, and challenges, is very close to my heart. I have been deeply involved in the field during my tenure as correspondent with NHK, that is Radio and Television Network of Japan, where I was covering mostly features and news stories on development. I have covered untold stories with passion and enthusiasm, like the killing of young brides for dowry, female feticide in central India, child marriages, rescue operations of bonded laborers from hand-woven carpet industry, and trafficked girls from brothels, or shooting at Mumbai's red light area to create awareness about HIV/AIDS. I have worked and filmed at the grassroots levels in several states of India with national NGOs and international organizations committed to eradicating child servitude and gender insensitivity, with special attention to the protection of children and marginalized segments of society. Well, I have also researched the efficacy and efficiency of the human rights campaign of Nobel laureate Kailash Satyarthi's Global March Against Child Labor through the continents of Asia, America, Africa, and Europe. The march eventually culminated at the ILO headquarters in Geneva in 1998. So let's start with the first question that comes to the mind when we talk about development journalism, and that is, when was development journalism recognized as a form of journalism? Well, this happened long back in 1960s at the Press Foundation of Asia when two Filipino journalists, Alan Chokle and Joan Marcado, showed their concern that news organizations were inadequately covering socio-economic development, and the journalists were reporting government press releases and quotes, but giving little attention to detailed analysis, interpretation, or evaluation of development projects, policies, or problems. These concerns led the Filipino journalists to organize seminars at the Press Foundation of Asia to train journalists in the art of development journalism. Development journalism, well, as conceived by Press Foundation of Asia, implies a confrontational relationship between the independent news media and the government, in which journalists provide critical appraisals and explanations of development plans and their implementations. It questions established news value, prioritizes regular people concern. It publishes stories that are critical of the government and its agencies, informs readers about how development affects them, and highlights local self help efforts. Development journalism is derived from development communication. This was practiced by extension agricultural workers in India and the Philippines. They used to disseminate information on new agricultural methods to farmers during a period of land reforms. Development journalism is not confined to agriculture alone. It has become a compendium of activities today. Development journalism, like conventional journalism, does not depend on official press releases, even though the journalist concerned would need to pursue them very carefully for an objective evaluation of a scheme under scrutiny. In the light of increasing importance of the media, that is the print, electronic, and social media, with so much advancement happening day by day, we can say that it is almost impossible to have a universal definition in the field of development, and this has been defined in other ways also, as per the journalist and their understanding and experience. Development journalism can be divided into two types of journalism, where the first new school started appearing in the 1960s. This school of thought is similar to investigative reporting, which focuses on the conditions in the developing world and how to improve them. The second one, it involves heavy influence from the government of the country involved. This can be a very powerful tool for local education and empowerment. However, it can also be powerful means of suppressing information and restricting journalists. Millennium in 1975 has defined journalism as something that handles the process of developing a nation. According to him, everything and anything that spoke about development comes under development news. Hence, he defines development news as everything that relates to administrative reforms, development in food production, news about agricultural development, articles about increase in economy of the country, news on education and employment, news about family planning, health, hygiene and medicine. Well, information about development schemes in both urban and rural regions, news on infrastructure development and national integration, news on social reformation and advancements in science and technology, news on telecommunication, mass communication and transport development, etc. What is very interesting is that there are several organizations which sponsor many projects related to development communication or development journalism, such as Food and Agricultural Organization, International Labour Organization, United Nations Development Programme, United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, that is UNESCO, United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF, World Health Organization, WHO. If any development journalist knows the activities of these organizations, he may have better reports to publish. The best way to explain this point is that I would like to go back to narrate an incident when I was covering a news story in the remote village of Uttarakhand. Now, what was happening was that the entire village was suffering from jaundice, and villagers thought it was curse of gods and were offering prayers, and the ojhas were treating the villagers, and everywhere there was cures, prayers, anxiety. Now, when the local health workers went there, they tried to find out the root cause of the problem. But what was it? Actually, what had happened was that villagers had one source of water, and the people used to do all their washing there. The water was also collected for drinking. What they saw was that a carcass of an animal was stuck at the source of the water. Probably the animal must have gone to drink water and got stuck. So the entire area there where the animal was stuck was clean, barricaded, and but when we were coming out and when the health workers were doing all this, I was just curious because as a reporter, I was shooting all that. So out of curiosity, I asked one of the villagers, why did they choose to go to the ojhas and not to the real doctors? Well, answer was quite alarming. They said first they had to walk a lot of distance to reach the health center. Sometimes the doctor was there, sometimes not. And the ojha was more convenient as he would take out the booth of the bimari and put it in the bottle और एक पुड़िया देता था that उससे एकदम ठीक हो जाते थे. So we said, okay, let's see this pudiya. So what we found out was that in that pudiya he was giving steroid, which immediately would give you a feel good feeling. Well, now you'll say, what was the impact of the story? The impact of the story was that there are health centers today in that area and people are more aware. That is the impact that the journalists covering development issues can make. Your communication approach should be effective, which helps to promote changes in knowledge, attitude, norms, beliefs, and behavior. So, getting back to the topic, let's now talk about development journalism in Indian context. as well as in India. This was previously carried out by agricultural extension workers during the land reform. They used to spread information about new agricultural methods to farmers. But today, development news is not limited to agriculture, but it is much more. Clearly, in the light of increasing importance of the media, print, and electronic, as also the social media, there is a need to give more attention to the important branch of journalism for rural transformation. I hope you'll all agree with me. Well, now let's define development journalism. Well, let me tell you that there is no single definition of this. So, we can say that it is the kind of journalism that pays attention to the coverage of ideas, policies, programs, activities, and events dealing with the improvement of the life of the people. This branch of journalism puts emphasis on the national and global development issues. It contributes positively to the development of the country concerned. We need to give adequate attention to this important branch of journalism for rural transformation, be it unequally distributed resources, communication gaps, and information blockages, programs of planned development, development blockages due to bureaucratization, political will, need for development communication and development support communication, efforts of international development organizations, and flow of development and investments. When we look at development journalism in the Indian context, there are many indicators added to it. For example, the environmental and ecological news, foreign news and features, news on globalization and international markets, news about culture and tradition of a country, information on trade and share markets, news about sports such as cricket, football, and other games, and special human interest stories come under the purview of development journalism. Apart from this, it also focuses on core issues which hinder development process like discrimination in the name of caste, crime against women and children, social marginalization, and other similar issues. The notion of gender empowerment is closely related to development in Indian context. It may also be reported as DBT, will help below poverty line BPL families in lieu of subsidized food, fertilizer, and fuel or not, whether the people of a particular city or town will get continuous power supply in the summer or not, whether residents of village will get clean and potable water or not, whether sanitation and sewer facilities will improve in town and cities or not. Well, having said that, now you would be wondering what is the difference between conventional journalism and development journalism. So let's talk about it. Conventional journalism is the formation of public opinion in vertical, that is, from dominant mainstream group to grassroots, and whereas development journalism is the molding of public opinion that is horizontal, actual views of grassroots and those affected by policies are given priority here. Conventional journalism, it highlights individual achievements and accomplishments, whereas development journalism highlights community empowerment as a source of self-reliant community. It tries out new methods and procedures, takes risks, so has more ways of gathering information and its ultimate narratives. And conventional journalism, well, it follows prescribed and tested rules and procedures in journalism, factual reporting, objective consumption, subjective oriented. On the other hand, development journalism is interpretive, that is, reporting for the community. It's growth oriented, unlike conventional journalism, which is mass entertainment, infotainment, that is all about understanding attitudes and behavior change. News is not saleable but responsive news, which allows people to talk, gives them a voice. What I would like to emphasize here is that Teaching development communication or teaching development journalism in the classroom is not just okay. You have to train and sensitize the students about the conditions at the grassroots level. Why I am narrating incidents from my news stories is that we have to bring about behavior change, and you need to have this kind of behavior change in a calculated manner in the society through your reports and documentaries. And unless you yourself have been in the field and practiced, covered, or helped to create a change, you cannot inspire budding journalists. It is to be sensitive to the issues. So I would like to re-emphasize this, because what I just said, that you just can't teach this kind of field sitting in the classroom, is that development journalist task is to go beyond conventional reporting or informing the public. The development journalist writing is not limited to regular beats like politics, crime. He or she writes about economics, population, health, nutrition, environment, agriculture, and other development topics. Therefore, development journalism aims to create positive change in the society through sustainable development. This development is possible only through the constant involvement of stakeholders and policymakers. It includes various techniques through which information is disseminated and community participation is involved. Development journalism constantly strives to transform an underdeveloped society into a developed society by uplifting the standard of living of its people. Development journalism has also been called as the fifth theory of the press, as it hopes to fulfill the basic needs by social transformation and development. It is enrooted in three main ideas like the purpose of the communication, value of the communication, and pragmatic of the communication. It is the art and science of human communication applied to the society to achieve equality and gain human potential. It aims to combat injustice and oppression. So, coming back to the topic, now let me ask you, if you were to shoot the problems of child labor or report the problems of child labor, how would you cover it? You simply cannot report directly from the field and say, आप देख रहे हैं मेरे पीछे ये क्या हो रहा है, or have loud open debates. You just cannot. No, our job is to create awareness, as I said, bring behavior and social change. So what do? You try to find a human angle and revolve the story around it. And this definitely cannot be done, I repeat, sitting in your AC rooms and relying on Google for research. Similarly, one of the news stories which I have to tell you and which I can never forget was in the 90s. It was the shooting in the carpet belt of Mirzapur with Nobel laureate Kailash Satyarthi. The biggest challenge was and has been making people understand that child labor was actually akin to slavery and was a deep social and is a deep social evil rather than a non issue that profited from the practice of child labor. Because once you go and the parents they say कि हमारा बेटा है वो काम कर रहा है, अगर घर में दो चार पैसे एक्स्ट्रा आ जाएंगे तो क्या हो जाएगा, but then you're depriving the child of his rights, his education, you're depriving him. So how do you do it? That is the biggest challenge that development journalists face. So that is the kind of the attitude and behavior that you have to change. So let me continue with my shoot. I have shot children hidden in deep trenches, children with their little fingers making expensive carpets for exports, middlemen going to the villages on the pretext of giving good jobs to the children and luring the parents with good money and telling them, बस आप इतना पैसा ये हर महीने आपको भेजेगा और आप अब आपकी ज़िंदगी सुधर गई, and then selling these children as bonded labor in the carpet industry. But believe me, when you are actually in the field, it's not simple. Even if you have the police protection, you are not protected. The owners here were local goons. and they had guns, the local kattas, and where they had hidden the children was pretty alarming. So, as a journalist, your moral duty now becomes not only to the children, but to yourself, to your channel, and to the public at large to expose this kind of nexus. I also remember a raid which we had done in the stone quarry, and the small children were rescued. What was alarming and, in fact, shocking for a young journalist, I was young at that time, was that the children who were rescued, of course, were terrified and they really didn't know what to do. So, to calm them, we offered them banana. And what was more alarming was that these children had never seen banana, which is the most cheap fruit available in the market. And they were eating the banana with the peel. Can you imagine that? Well, this is the hard reality of life. You come face to face while you're doing these kind of stories. But the impact and the awareness and the policy changes you can help to bring is indeed satisfying. Hence, we can mention the objectives of development communication as are put forth by Fawcett, as he defines that development journalism has a basic purpose. The purpose is to inform, to educate, and to entertain the public. Development journalism has a basic objective, which is to investigate, analyze, and interpret, and to commit oneself to the development. It must give accurate information on development that facilitates the process of development itself. Development journalism must work for mutual understanding of the leaders with the people for carrying the schemes and policies of development by the government and relaying people's need and aspirations to the government. It has to motivate people and policy towards the real need of the society. It must also encourage participatory environment where people work for development. It must encourage a healthy atmosphere between people, encouraging productive attitudes like cooperation, long term national efforts, advancement in agricultural production, healthy and hygiene practices, acceptance of new innovation, etc. It must also foster national development and help build a common goal of enriching knowledge and ideas that are favorable to the growth of the nation. Well, ever since development communication started in India, it has been going through several changes and amendments on how communication can be of use to the development of the society in a better way. The role of communication in the process of economic and social well being was phrased and rephrased many times. With the advancement in technology and the growing industrial and political factors, the field of development communication is also getting new insights and developing new concepts in acting as a catalyst in promoting growth. There are various approaches to development communication. First is the modernization approach. According to this approach, the importance of development communication was felt by the third world nation in their fight for self reliance, independence, and non alignment with the developed nations after the Second World War. These were underdeveloped countries who were trying their best to come out of the problems like poverty, illiteracy, and unemployment. Second is dependency or structuralist approach. As a reaction towards modernization models, the dependency theory was put forth in the year 1970 with the strong articulation of Marxism and Marxist theories of imperialism. The dependency theory was put forth by Paul Baran and Andre Gunder Frank, who outlined that underdevelopment was not original condition of any place or region. The new development in the advancement capitalist countries was due to the industrialization process, which led to economic growth and made the other countries poor. Third is the alternative approaches. These approaches of media focused on the cultural and social identities of a nation, which are seen as inhibitors of development. It also emphasized in the participatory approach, which was felt as the key factor for development. Now that we have talked about advantages of development journalism, well, this type of journalism has a lot of attraction for development countries. First, in countries where poverty is the norm, the government of the day wants and needs as much support as it can get. A press that reports government influences and inefficiencies is therefore not welcome. As a tool for social justice, development journalism is very valuable in that it acts as a voice for the voiceless by informing the rest of the world about important issues within developing nations. Also, the government will probably have to take decisions which are based on the common good but which harm individual liberties. These decisions may be highly unpopular, but they have to be taken. And a hostile press can hold back government's progress, while a supportive press can help the government push these policies ahead. There are disadvantages also of development journalism. The pitfalls of the development approach are many. First, the press becomes far less critical and eventually is forced to give up its watchdog role in the society. As it continuously panders to the government, the media loses its critical edge and becomes nothing more than another government mouthpiece. When this happens, it paves the way for a virulent underground or alternative press with a strong anti government approach. The most dangerous pitfall is the fact that the press gives up its right to question and demand accountability from the government of the day. Now, we talked about problems of development reporting in India as no proper knowledge about concept of development and insufficient information about development among journalists who practice journalism. You'll agree. Inadequate training in gathering and presenting the data of development in formats that can be easily understood. Lack of interest shown by journalists and newspapers to cover development issues. Lack of funds to cover issues on development from newspaper organizations or the government. Another important point I would like to say here is that reporting for development communication involves a lot of challenges in establishing the connection between people who are involved in it. It is a crucial task and a critical task for a journalist to connect with the people from the developed and underdeveloped nations and establish a link with them. It requires collecting information from one end of the continent to the other. One of the effective uses of mobile phone in development journalism is connecting the people from the developed countries to the developing countries. When a development issue is covered, the journalist should ensure that the voices of the ordinary people are covered. Usually, in any news, the ordinary people who live below the poverty line or who are underdeveloped in a society who belong to lower income segment are often projected only in negative way by the media. Unlike other reports, which can be done sitting at a desk, like I said before, the development journalism requires a reporter to train him and report from the field. He has to be physically present in the area where there is development issue and report facts by checking it, and statistics is often used as a proof for an objective truth and a support for a conclusion by the journalist. The fact is, statistics comes from studies which have to be validated. It is the duty of the journalist to validate each and every data which he gets from the statistics. In this regard, we must talk about the news values of development journalism. First, development journalism can be used in two different ways to enable the audience prosper. One is by articulating government's projects to serve the development goals of the government, while the other is by playing the investigative role that brings useful information to the knowledge of the audience. When they point out what the government is supposed to do for them and what is not being done. Development journalists should report in terms of positive program through success stories and advocacy. Social responsibility. Journalist reporting development needs to focus on ordinary people because it's these common people that bear the brunt of the impact of government decisions and suffer most from deprivation arising from public expenditure. Priorities should be there. They also make up the largest sector of the population. Well, let's talk about education. This is where the development journalism makes the audience understand how they will benefit from the adoption or use of a certain project. Talking about national integration, the pillars of development journalism are national building, creation of national consciousness, unity, and encourages togetherness. This creates a peaceful coexistence between diverse and sometimes hostile communities. And of course, human interest. When we talk about human interest, well, the development stories need not be lifeless and predictable. The journalist can give these stories impact by putting people in them because, in the end, development is about changing lives, and that's what listeners relate to. Now, let's get back to the topic because this is my favorite subject. I told you, so I'll keep going back to the case studies. So, let's discuss the points which you have to keep in mind while teaching this branch of reporting to the budding journalists. First, encourage them to travel to remote areas, interact with the people, and report back. Read the proposed government projects to improve conditions in the country and analyze whether or not they will be effective. Encourage them to come up with proposed solutions and actions in the piece, suggesting ways in which they might be implemented. Have an open forum of discussion. They should be able to conceptualize development journalism as news that is related to primary needs of the country's population. A news that satisfies the needs of the population and contributes to self reliance, and of course, news that is related to economic or political development or social problems on the field. They should do the background work, take bites from all the stakeholders, have in depth knowledge about the subject so that they can pick up a success story and do their story around it. They should look for reference material like facts, figures, statistics. Now, when we are talking about statistics, let me elaborate again with the reference to news feature I had done on child marriage. Now, before I had actually gone to the field, I had all the facts, figures with me, and on the basis of that, plus with the local journalist, we identified where exactly maximum child marriages are going to happen, and on that particular day. So, along with my team, I go to the exact location, and my local resource very casually tells me that government has banned, so no child marriages have happened for past 2 years. So I said, but you've been talking to me on the phone, and things have been, and we've come here, we've done everything. So what happens to all the research and statistics? They fail me. What do I do? Well, as a typical journalist who has nose for news, I felt something was amiss. So after much talking to the locals and NGOs, finally we realized that the news was true. There were marriages happening. And but again, these things happen in a very protected environment. And as a journalist, you need to respect the human integrity and the mindset of the people, as behavior change is not an immediate process. You just can't say rok do ye shadi. No, there's a custom around it. You have to sensitize them, otherwise you can't do it. So now I would again like to ask you, if you were to cover this kind of story, how would you do it? Would you report from the ground? I'll tell you what we did, which will be a good example as a case study. We went back to the area, we re researched the part, and decided to cover the compulsions behind the custom and the solutions to it. Hence, maintaining a human angle to the news feature, Today, we hardly hear about such customs. Literacy rate in Rajasthan has gone up, and there is free education to girl child, and there are other schemes of the government of India which have helped the women in empowering themselves. So these little small steps make a big impact. The question that now comes up is that what are the points to be kept in mind while writing such stories and features? Firstly, you have to have interesting opening. So let me go back to the child marriage story. I did not go on the field and report on screen like आप देख रहे हैं ये यहाँ पर ये कैसे whatever. Nor did we have open discussions. What we did was we raised the whole issue of the life of a woman in the area by identifying the main protagonist. After a lot of research, believe me, that and also staying in the area, making people acknowledging your presence and not resisting you. We built the story around a young widow who had lost her husband at the age of 5, and how this customs and superstition is still there, and there is a need again for a change. But question arises, how do you bring the change? Well, first of all, it has to be interactive process with individuals, groups or communities, then to develop communication strategies to promote positive behaviors that are appropriate to their settings, thereby solving the issues so that through your news, feature, podcast, etc., people will be able to initiate, sustain, and maintain positive and desirable behavior outcomes in a supportive setting. Now, let's talk about what are the skills required to be a successful development journalist, as discussed earlier. Beyond doubt, development journalism empowers the people. You must have realized now that the development reporting is different from general reporting. It is a process and not an event. Follow up is an integral part of this kind of writing. As discussed earlier, encourage your students to visit a subject place many a times. This kind of writing focuses on why and how development issues are often hidden in figures and statistics. It needs to see beyond them and connect it to the ground realities, like the example I gave of child marriage. News stories, facts, and figures were in my hand, but the ground reality was expose wrongdoings and report about success stories. Field reporting is an essential part of development writing. As an academician, it is our duty that we should sensitize our students about development issues, about people, their conditions, and the real impact of development schemes on people. Students should have respect for diversity and different social, cultural, and economic realities. Encourage them to discuss issues in an informed, inclusive, and non discriminatory way with a clear understanding of local perspectives. Students should be open to critical information, and this means that going beyond conventional thinking and investigating difficult subjects with a sense of inquiry, honesty, and objectivity. So, before we come to the end of the lecture, there's something more that I would like to discuss because the previous points that we have been discussing. So, again, I would rather go back to a case study. And like I was saying about child marriage, child labor, I must also tell you that what are the problems one faces when actually shooting on the ground. And here was such story about female feticide, that is killing the baby in the womb, and female infanticide. So what would happen was that in the northern belt of India, we knew that there is a lot of child feticide and female infanticide is happening. So we decided that let's try to expose this problem. So what we did was we went into that area and we searched for midwives, because in these kind of areas they rely more on midwives than the health centers, because during the time of the pregnancy, midwife would, through her experience, she would tell the mother, oh, you're going to have a son, oh, you're going to have a daughter, and before actually the birth of the child, the sex of the child, through the vision and vice of midwives, So there was an organization which was working to stop this practice, and they were making them into health workers, right? So we went to that organization, and through that organization, we came to know that in the nearby village, a mother has given birth to a child, and they said that it's a girl child. We said, wow, let's go and congratulate the mother. So we bought some sweets and clothes for the baby, and that's how normally you approach them. So we went there, and nobody was opening the door. We said, okay, let them have their privacy. Then suddenly crying, lots of crying. So what happened? So what was happened was that they said the baby died. So I said, what happened? He said, वो तो मरी हुई पैदा हुई थी. So I said, okay, that's very sad. I thought that yes, it could be possible because of the mother might not be taking care of herself during pregnancy, so it's okay. So one of the child, he said, आपको baby देखना है? So I said, हाँ. I'm still remembering that. So he said that आइए मैं आपको दिखाता हूँ. So they said हाँ हाँ अभी उसके पापा उसको बरी करने गए हैं. So we said okay, we'll pay respects and we'll stand at a distance. We'll not disturb. So we we went there, and we saw the father burying. So suddenly that small kid said, "Oh, ये तो बच्चा हिल रहा है." We said, "What?" So through the NGO that was there, anyway, we rescued the baby. The baby was the parents were not willing to take the girl child, care for the girl child, because they were worried that they would have to start accumulating dowry, and they did not have that much of money, and they wanted son because son would help them in the fields, and because they could not afford labor, so that's why they already had 7 sons and 3 daughters, and none of the daughter was alive. So the NGO that was there, they said that okay, we'll take care of the child. And you'll be very surprised to know that girl today is a very famous journalist. So, see the thing and the impact that you can have through your stories. And that girl is making wonderful news, and it's like she's got prizes also. So, the thing is, that is the kind of an impact you make. Female infanticide and feticide is on decline, but it'll take lot of news and impact analysis from us journalists. So, to make a better change. Well, you must be wondering that I have been discussing case studies and teaching from my own experience, but that what is important, because these small things, as I said earlier, makes a lot of difference. And this is what is now your job, to teach your students to make this world a better place. So, well, I can continue on and on, but because of the time constraint, and I would like to conclude by the famous quote about development journalism, that is, it is a community journalism to achieve larger objectives: social justice, improving health, education, bringing people together. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I enjoyed presenting it. I would like to again thank the organizers, the Teaching Learning Center of Ramanujan College, Delhi University, and Xavier's College, Ranchi, for organizing this FDP, and my regards to each and every participant. Namaskar.